Hello everyone, it's Annie, and today I wanted to do a recommendation video. It's a little bit specific, but this is one of my newfound favorite genres, which is historical fiction middle grade. So sit back, relax, and let me show you these 6 recommendations. First, I'd like to recommend a new release, which is Ophi's Ghosts. This book was so, I don't know, it was just such a great combination of things. It has ghosts, obviously, and it's historical fiction. It takes place in the 1920s, I believe, in Philadelphia. And it starts out with this young girl named Ophi, whose father is tragically killed on his way back from voting, which at the time was technically legal. However, they lived in Georgia when this happened, and because of the Jim Crow laws down there, he was killed, and no justice, sadly, was done about that. So her and her mother basically fled to Philadelphia to stay with their family there, and Ophi, instead of going to school, has to work with her mother as a housemaid. When she is working at a very rich family's house in Philadelphia, she sees ghosts. She starts to see ghosts all around this house. And one of the ghosts has a mystery attached to her that Ophi needs to solve. I thought this book was great. I loved Ophi. I loved the characters of her aunt, and I loved the ghosts and the way that she deals with the ghosts in the story. I liked the mystery a lot. I gave it 4 stars. I do wish there was a little bit more development between maybe her and her mom and their relationship, but I mean, it's a middle grade, so I can't expect a sweeping, historical fiction's generational saga out of it. So I think this book was extremely successful with what it did, and I highly recommend it. Next, I'd like to recommend Brother's Keeper by Julie Lee. I do have a physical copy of this, but at the time I'm filming, it is currently packed away in my suitcase for moving. So I'm gonna put the picture up. This book is about a sister and brother who have to escape from North Korea during the Korean War, and they go mostly on foot to the South Korean city of Busan, right at the tip of the Korean peninsula. And this book is so sad. Very, very sad. So be a little bit careful. It is middle grade, but it deals with such heavy themes. I mean, it's the Korean War. It's one of the most devastating wars in history, and it definitely shows. It shows on the page. And it is written in a really understandable way, I think, so that if I were a kid reading this middle grade novel, I feel like I could really begin to understand a lot more about the Korean War and how it affected the people actually living there and who were displaced and had to be split from their families and everything like that. It was a really beautiful book, beautiful characters, the way that this older sister protects and does anything and everything for her younger brother to keep him safe. It is a really heartwarming yet sad story that I highly recommend. It is really underrated, so I really recommend you guys take a look at it and read it. And then I'd like to recommend The Blackbird Girls. I loved this book. I think this is probably one of my favorite books of all time. It is so good. I was so taken aback by how good it is and how nuanced and how many difficult topics it takes on successfully. This book is a masterpiece. It has 2 timelines, but the main timeline is set in the 1980s in Ukraine when the Chernobyl nuclear disaster happens. And at the time, of course, Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union, and it follows these 2 girls. One is Jewish and one is not. She's just Ukrainian. And they have kind of a tumultuous relationship with each other. The Jewish girl is bullied by this Ukrainian girl because of her religion, and they have to reconcile these differences when both of their fathers are killed in the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. So this book tackles already so many different things. It tackles religion, anti-Semitism, the Chernobyl disaster, which you could write a whole book on in and of itself. But these two girls then have to travel to St. Petersburg because they have nowhere else to go, no other family, no one else to stay with. And there's so many good things. This book is so good. Please read it. It also tackles the topic of family abuse, and so good. The other timeline is set in the 1940s during the Nazi invasion of Ukraine and Russia itself, and their caretaker who is with them in St. Petersburg, and her experience with that as a Jewish woman during that time. So there's a lot of parallels there in the two timelines, and I just cannot say enough good things about this book. It is seriously gorgeous, so beautiful. Please read it. And then I'd like to talk about a book I read fairly recently, which is Prairie Lotus. I was quite, I don't know about surprised, but I kind of was surprised after I read it because I feel like more people should be talking about it. I've never heard someone on Booktube that I watch talk about this book. I mean, I'm sure other people have, but I was surprised that this book didn't get more buzz. I'm really quite surprised about it. It is set during the time of Western expansion in the United States, so like Oregon Trail times and all of that, where the Midwest was fairly undeveloped in a Western sense, if you know what I mean. So it follows this young girl who is half Chinese and half white. Her father is traveling with her. Her mother, unfortunately, has passed away earlier on before the story starts. And we're following her and her father trying to find a place to stay that will accept his daughter, who is not well liked by most people, especially outside of California, which is where she was born. So it is a very, very difficult read at times because it just made me so angry. A lot of racism in this story directed at the main character, and she is such a sweet thing. She is so nice and she just wants to help people. She's such a sweet girl. She's very smart as well, and all she wants to do is go to school and graduate and get her diploma, and so many people just want to stop her from doing all of these things, and it is really sad, but I loved it, and the ending is happy because it is a middle grade, and I really thought that the setting was very evocative as well. I felt like I was on the prairie, you know, in this time period, and I also loved the descriptions of the fashions of the time. That was so fun to see, and it was really good. It also tackles the sad fact of the Native Americans being persecuted at the time and basically having nowhere to go, and all of the laws and racism targeted against them, and how the main character feels about that versus what is targeted against her. And I thought it was a beautifully done novel that definitely more people should read. And next, I'd like to talk about another fairly new release. It came out in January of 2021, which is Root Magic. I love this book. Honestly, I think this book is perfect. I absolutely loved it. It's set in the 1960s in South Carolina, and it follows a family that practices root magic. And it is so fascinating to learn about their history and the magic that they practice. And this family is suffering from persecution by white people of the time and also by other Black people who look down on root magic users. This book follows the twins Jay and Jezebel as they turn 11 years old and begin to learn their familial root magic. But things kind of take a turn when evil shows up in the town, both supernatural and human, and Jay and Jez, who is really the main character that we focus on, she has to use her root magic and her knowledge of this to basically save her family. And I loved it. I felt like I was in the marshes of South Carolina. I felt like I almost sweated when I was reading this. The writing really transports you to this time and place. It's so good. I love Jezebel. She's so cute, and I really think that her relationship with her twin brother Jay was very complex and well written, and I loved everything about this book. You need to read it. And last book I want to recommend, but certainly not least, is Under the Broken Sky by Mariko Nagai. This book was extremely sad. Even sadder, I think, than Brother's Keeper, because first of all, it's written in verse, and it is a fast read, but it is so emotional. It really does not shy away from describing the horrors of war, and especially what war does to children and the innocent victims of it. So basically, the synopsis is that it follows this Japanese family who was living in Manchuria, but when the Russians start to invade Manchuria, this is in World War II, they have to run away, otherwise they will be taken and captured as prisoners because they are Japanese. And these two children, their father was conscripted by the Japanese army, even though the war was almost over and Japan knew they were going to lose. He was still taken away from his family, leaving his two children alone to fend for themselves, and they have to travel from Manchuria to Harbin, a northern city in China, to escape. And even when they get there, they do not escape from the horrors of war, and it is so sad. So do be careful. Like I said, even though it's a middle grade, they do not shy away from the horrors of war. I would also recommend you don't read the synopsis on Goodreads because it spoils a big part of the book that happens towards the end, and I don't know who decided to write that synopsis that way, but please don't read it because you will be spoiled. All I can say is that this book is beautifully, beautifully written, and again, severely underrated. It is beautiful and really evocative as well, and I love the characters. The story was just heart-wrenching, and more people need to read it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you got some new books to add to your TBR from this. If you've read any of these books, please let me know in the comments, and I'd love to talk to you about your opinions about them. And I'll see you next time in my next bookish video. Bye!